moving around in Maya. So the first thing that you should know is that Maya has different workspaces. So if you look at, you're probably on Maya Classic right now. And that means that it's got some things over on the on this side, some little windows that you can open up. There are tabs here, or the tabs are up at the top. They sort of move in different places depending. And then there's also, this one doesn't have an outliner in it, but it's got this this is the playback window and the time slider. And here's a little thing that you can enter Mel or Python, and a little status line. And so, but we're not going to work in Maya Classic the whole time. We're going to work the two that we're going to use the most. And, all these different things, they will open up. Like if you're doing rigging, it opens up the tools that are best for rigging. And so if you're in the UV editing, which you don't even know what that is just yet, it opens up the UV toolkit is here, and tool settings. So different things all around Windows open up depending on the workspace. So they have these predetermined workspaces, and we're mostly going to be using Modeling Standard. And what you'll notice about Modeling Standard is that there is no timeline. There is no playback window. There is an outliner. This opens up, this is for Human IK, and it's got the attribute editor and some other things here. And the other one that we might be able to use by the end. So this is what a beginning modeler uses. But if you go to Maya Expert, you'll see what an expert Maya modeler uses. All they have is the view panel where they're working, because everything that you're doing by keyboard commands. You don't need all of those extra windows to be open all the time. So you're really trying, the idea is to get yourself so that you're using as much as you can keyboard commands and ways to make your life fast and simple, and everything is big so it's easy to work, because you want things to be right in your face. But for now, Maya Standard is fine. Perfectly acceptable. No judgment. Yes, Julian.
How do you get the 4 screens? I think I just have one.
Good question. All right, so you can get them over here. Here's 4 screens, and here is 1 screen. These little icons here, 1 screen, 4 screens. And let me show you how else. So I'll just tell you that you can put your mouse, you don't have to click. You can put your mouse in any one of these screens and hit the spacebar really fast, and it makes it full screen. Hit the spacebar really fast, it makes it 4-panel view. So that's better than going over here. So you can come in here and it's a side view. I'll explain what you're looking at later, but that's a way you can hop between these different panels.
Thank you.
Sure. So what I recommend as a workflow is you can ask a question just like that, because that was a question that will help everyone. If you can also ask a question by putting a question in the chat, and Macy is here and she can help you, can answer your question. And Isa is here and she can answer your question. So they're your 2 TAs for today, and they're happy to answer your questions in the chat. And I can set up some breakout rooms, although I don't think we'll need them, that you can go to automatically. And so if you need to go off and get some help off in the side, you can do that, or just look at the recording later on. Okay, so these are the different workspaces will be in Maya Modeling Standard. The other thing that's really important to know is this little drop down. This drop down here are the modules. So if you look, this is the main menu. And Maya can do so many different things that the main menu is quite complex. There's a lot of things here: file, edit, create, select, modify, display, windows. And then at this end, you've got help, substance, and Arnold, and cache. And that's those. And then in between are all the different edit mesh, mesh tools, mesh display, curves, surfaces, deform, UV, generate. These are all things that are used by when you're modeling. If you click down to rigging, you'll see that it has file, edit, create, select, modify, display, windows. And then it starts getting to skeleton and skin and things that you're going to use when you're doing rigging. And then at the end, you've got cache, Arnold, substance, and help. So all these different things animation has for making keyframes. Special effects have all these special effects generators, and then for rendering, it's got all these different things that are related to rendering. So we're going to use every single one of those modules. They're called modules. And there's so many different menus so if you're seeing, this is really important to know, because if you are looking at a tutorial or I'm talking to you and I'm saying, okay, go to the mesh display menu, there's where you're going to find the normals conform, and you don't see the mesh display menu, it's probably because you're in the wrong module. We're just in rigging and you forgot to put it back. Okay, so if ever you don't see the right menu, make sure you're in the right module. And then inside of each one of these items, you can click on any one of the main menu items, and you'll see that there's this long list of functions, and some of them have sub functions. They'll have a little arrow here, and then there's a sub window with extra functions, and some of them have a little square, an outline square. And those outline squares always mean that there's an options box. And that options box gives you more options for how you're going to set up that particular tool. So there are things within the menu items, there are sub-menu items, and there are option boxes. Some things you may find are colored green. That just means it's new this year to this version. So everything, so much here. And I'm going to try to make your life easy by using as few of these as possible, right? We're going to use a lot of them, and it's going to build up and build up and build up, but you don't need to use every single tool in order to make a good model. But there are a lot of tools here, and there are multiple ways to do pretty much everything that you want to do in Maya. A lot of overlap. They just keep adding on new things, and they don't take anything away. So it's just become this huge, laundry list bucket full of smorgasbord full of different things that you can do. And so that's why it's one reason it's so complex. So to the right of the modeling module of the module dropdown, there are a few icons for saving, and then there's some stuff for getting into hierarchy, things with hierarchy. You'll see some things, there's a vertical line and a little arrow. That means that there's hidden some even more things that you can do. This is a pick mask where you can say, I only want to be able to select joints, for example. Here's snapping. And again, it's open and it's closed, right? You can just sort of toggle them open and closed depending on your window size. And most of these things we have keyboard commands for. One of the things that we use quite a bit are these little icons here, because it's really convenient to find them here. These open up windows that we use often. And then this also is a great way to rename or to do absolute values. So we'll use this from time to time. And again, it may be hidden. And then there's a sign in if you're using a computer that's in a public place and you want to keep all your preferences, you can sign in, and then every time you open up, it'll always look the same so that somebody else doesn't come and change things on you. Okay, so the outliner shows, if you don't have an outliner, you can go into Windows, Outliner, and it'll open it up. If you click on the outliner, it becomes a little tab on the side. You can open it up again here. And you can also pull it off, but I recommend you don't. It's really hard sometimes to get them to go back into place. So sometimes you just accidentally pull a window off and it's floating by itself, and you can kind of try to get them to fit back in. So the outliner shows all the objects that are in the scene. And right now it's showing some cameras. These are little cameras, and they're grayed out because they're locked. You can't delete them. And these are the 4 cameras that we see here. We're actually looking through a camera in each one, a different camera in each one of these views. So let's start, and this is the shelf. So the shelf has the one that is usually up for the modeling one. The one that's chosen is this on these tabs is the Arnold shelf. And that's really convenient because it makes it really easy to get to some of these commonly used tools for Arnold. Otherwise, all those things can be found in the Arnold menu, which is in each of the modules has an Arnold menu. But let's say you go to poly modeling, you click on that. And here are like all the primitives that you might want to use and some of the tools that you can find, bevel components. Most of these things I'm going to show you how to find them using the keyboard commands and the mouse, but they're also can be found on this shelf. So you could create a sphere by clicking on this sphere here. And then you could delete it to get rid of it, or you could come up to create polygon primitives and choose sphere, and it creates a sphere. Or you can do, and I'm going to delete it, you can do what I've done. I show you how to do this in one of the practice sheets. You set up a keyboard command. So it is, for us, it is Control, Shift, and O for a, it isn't on yours yet, but for me, I can just go like that. And boy, I have a sphere. Really easy. I didn't have to touch my mouse. That's the goal, right? You want to make it really easy, really fast to create stuff. So you're moving fast because you're doing so many things. The faster you can move, the better. Okay, so you've got this sphere and it's created at the origin, 0, 0, 0 in coordinate space. And let's pull up, make sure you have the channel box showing. That's either this little icon right here on the right, this sort of stack of papers, because it's the channel box, and the layer editor is right down here. And this is a really important window, and it shows you P-Sphere 1 that we've created. And let's rename it. So you can rename it here in the channel box. We can call it S1 for Sphere 1. You can also rename it in the outliner. So you can double click here and you can name it back to Sphere 1. So you can rename it in the outliner. You can rename it in the channel box. You can select it from the outliner. This does not select it from here. This just is for renaming it. Okay, so, and you can also select it by just clicking on it. I'll tell you about selection more in a minute. So, all right. So when you are looking at this, just look at me for one moment. When you're looking at the camera, if this is the sphere, I should have a little sphere here. I have some somewhere, but I won't go get it. If this is the sphere, let me undo my virtual, hold on. Let me undo my blur. Oops. You can see a little better. Okay, if this is the sphere, this is the object you've created, and this is the camera, right? So we're looking through the camera, and cameras can do all kinds of things. Cameras can kind of move around an object freely. So if you put your mouse, you don't have to click on it, just put it in the persp window. So you've got a perspective window in a camera, and hit the space bar quickly. Okay, and now you see this in full screen. And if you hit Option or Alt with a Windows machine and left mouse button click and drag, so left mouse button click and drag, we are now rotating around in space. If you click on that sphere, it has not moved. It didn't move. The camera is moving, and you can see it here when you see where world space is. So what's happening is the object is staying exactly the same and the camera is moving about. Okay. The other thing you can do with a camera is you can move it, dolly it in and out. You can move it closer and further. And to get to that, you use Option and middle mouse button click. I'm sorry, right mouse button click, and that moves you in and out. So right mouse button click and Option moves you closer and further away from your object. And then Option and middle mouse button click and drag, and you're moving left and right and up and down. You can even see the little arrows that show you that all you can do is, you can't move closer. You can only move up and down and left and right. So that's the camera just going this way and this way. So the camera can rotate around, it can dolly in, and it can track left, right, up, down, track and pan. Okay, let's hit the space bar and see the 4-panel view again. These are called view panels or viewports. And this is the perspective camera, PERS. These other 3 are called orthographic cameras. And orthographic cameras by design are always perpendicular. The camera is always perpendicular to the object. So it can go in and out, it can dolly in and out, track in and out, but it cannot rotate. And it can go left, right, up, down, but you can't rotate. So why don't you go into any of these views, click to make it large. And try option left mouse button clicking, and it says orthographic views are currently locked, right? You cannot, it does nothing, but you can use your right mouse button, click and drag, and you can use your middle mouse button, and you can also use your scroll wheel to go in and out. So your scroll wheel can be used to move in and out, but you cannot, the camera cannot move around this. It's always by design orthographic to it. So this is a view from the front, there's a view from the top, and there's a view from the side. And that's what these are. And you can change the panels that you're looking through. So you can go up in each one of these view panels has its own menus, and just to make life more complicated. And you can see here, you can turn this one into a perspective view, or you can turn it into a hypergraph panel, so some other kind of a window, or you can turn it into a stereo window or an orthographic window, and you can create new ones right from here. So I'm going to go back to this one was the top. Okay, so you can change these views in different ways. And over here, you can make it a 2-panel view. And you can also do this up here in the in the Windows UI elements and heads up display. So display, heads up display, you can choose what you're going to see. Okay, so these are that's the sort of navigating around in the scene using the camera and the mouse. Your object is by default, again, it gets created at the origin. And so let's just for a moment, just hit the W key, because I can't stand those little tool things, and just move it out of the way somewhere. And then create a cube. And you can either do it with the shelf, you can go into create polygon cube, or I'm going to do it my fancy way and just that. Yes, Stacia.
I'm sorry, how do you move the sphere away from the origin again?
Oh yeah, you activate the move tool. And so that's this tool. You can either click on this tool or you hit the W key. When you hit the W key, you can just, there's a little yellow box in the middle and you can just move it. Somehow I created two.
I got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. So now with two objects here, I can show you something about, and let's rename this guy just because it's a good thing to do that. So let's rename it to P or to cube C1. And we'll talk more about that in a minute, or on Wednesday, we'll get into more of this stuff. So how do you select? So there are different ways to select. You can click on it to select it. And I'm gonna go back to the Q key. So these here are, this is the toolbar. The top one is the select, which is Q, that uses QWERTY on the keyboard, so the Q key. This is a little lasso select, which I never use, but it's a way you can draw a line around objects and it selects them both. This is a paint select, which I love and I use, but we'll talk about that in a minute or another time. And this is the move tool. You have to come back into object mode. So if you selected the paint select tool, you got into component mode. So you need to choose them, right mouse button click and go to object mode. So that when you see it, it should look green or white. But if you are in component mode, it's gonna be blue. Okay, more on that in a second. So, so this is the move tool, it's the W key. This is the rotate key tool, it's the E key. And this is the scale tool, it's the R key. More on those in a second. All right, selecting, back to selecting. So hit Q for select. And you can, again, you can select by clicking on and clicking off, or you can just marquee drag and click and drag. That's what I like to do. And the last object selected is green. And when it's the object that's selected that's green is what shows in the channel box. So I named it sphere 1. That's what shows in the channel box. But if you go over to object, you'll see that they both are there. They're both part of this, and you can change between them what's showing in this channel box, but they're both there. And if I hit the W key for move with both of them selected, one is white, one is green, and I take that little yellow square in the middle and I move it around, they both move. And I'll get into selection more. You can also select one and then shift select another. The order is important because there are a lot of functions inside Maya that it matters which order you select in. So that's the only reason that it gets important, and also because it's the thing that shows up in the channel box. Okay. Let's go through the tools a little bit. So choosing either one of your objects, hit F to frame up on it. Make it nice and big. And you can, move this around. Actually move it so that it looks like this, so that the X is pointed to the right, the Y is pointed up, and the blue Z is pointed forward. That's sort of the way that Maya starts, and it talks about the Maya coordinate system, which is like a left-handed coordinate system. So if you hold up your left hand in an L, your thumb is pointing towards positive X, and your forefinger is pointing towards positive Y. And Z is forward towards you, and that's positive Z. Yes, Julian.
I think I accidentally put mine on vertices mode or something.
Okay, so right mouse button, click on your object and go to object mode.
Oh, okay.
No problem. Okay, so and you can think about it in terms of X, Y, Z, RGB. So X is always color-coded R, Y is color-coded green, and Z is color-coded blue. So it helps a little bit with that. And this little tool, if you want to make it bigger, you can use the plus key to make the handles bigger, and you can use the minus key to make them smaller. Okay. Now, there are different ways that you can move this object. I'm going to make it bigger just to make it easier to see when I'm looking at this. So one way to move it is by clicking in this little yellow square and just moving it around. And you'll notice that over here in the channel box, the values for translate X, translate Y, and translate Z are changing. As I move it over towards positive X, the number for X goes up. As I move it upward, the translate Y goes into the positive coordinate space. And if I move it forward towards me, it goes into positive space. So you can change directly from here. You can say, I want this to be translate X1, and it'll change it there. And you can select a bunch of different ones and go to 1, and they'll all move, right? So that's one way you can move things through the channel box. And in order to kind of control how you're moving things, you can also constrain the move. So if you grab just the red arrow, just click the red arrow, it turns yellow, and the other manipulator handles disappear. Do you see that? I'm clicking the red X handle, and now I can only move it in X. It's really handy. If you click the green arrow, it turns yellow, the other ones disappear. Now I can only move it in Y. And the same thing, of course, for the blue. Really handy, because you don't always want to just move it indiscriminately. And we're going to do an exercise today where you're going to want to control it. There are a couple other things about the move tool. There's these little guys. I'll show you that on Wednesday. Okay, so that's the W for the move tool. Now go to E, which is the rotate tool. Again, you can make it bigger or you can make it smaller. Should be out on the outside of your object. And again, for this, what's happening is you're rotating around the axis that is the color. So red is rotating around the x-axis. So when I move this, it's rotating around the x-axis. Let me get myself so that the x-axis is the way you would expect it. And when I'm moving the green on the green line, just on the green line, it's constraining it just to move around the y-axis. Oops, I gotta make sure I have that one, just that. And the blue is rotating around the z-axis. And then I can rotate in the middle freely. It's a little bit easier to do if your things are a little bigger. So around the y, around the x, and around the z, and then freely. Okay, so now let's get the R key for the rotate tool. And rotate is one that we're going to want to, a lot of the time, most of the time, scale. The scale tool, we're gonna most of the time want to scale uniformly because it just kind of looks better. So to do that, you are going to grab that yellow cube in the middle, click on that, and then just drag. Dragging to the left makes it smaller, dragging to the right makes it bigger. Smaller and bigger. And then of course you can just scale it in one direction or another direction or another direction. And to undo, if you didn't like something, you can just do Command Z, Command Z, Command Z, Command Z. We have infinite undos. It will undo all the way to your last save. And so speaking of saving, let's do that. So you created, last time you went into File, Project Window, and you created a new project that was something for working in class, like a tutorial or something that was just for these things. So if you hadn't done that, you should create a new project now. And then for that, and then we can go into File, Save Scene As. And it opens up this box. And it should say that your current project is that one that you created. You click on Scenes, and you can say something like your name and boot camp or something. And hit Save As. And now, again, if you look at the top of your window, you'll see users, the name of the user, documents, Maya, projects. Here's your project folder, here's your scenes folder, and here's the name of your file. And this is really, really important for lots of reasons. And let me show you one reason in particular. If you go into File, Save Scene, and open up the options box. So open up that little square to the right of the Save Scene. So File, Save Scene, Options box. It opens up these options, and there's this thing called incremental save. And you want to make sure that that is checked on. And then you can go ahead and click Save Scene. It'll give you a little thing saying there's nothing changed in this. But let's actually change something. So use a tool to make something a little bit different in your scene. Hit Command S to save it. And now let's open up your Finder. You'll have to open your Finder again. I'm sure it doesn't show on mine, but you should see it on yours. Open up your Finder, go into your projects window. Yes, you've Raj.
It shows a warning when I try to put the incremental save on.
Have you set up your project correctly?
What do you mean?
You have a project that looks like this. Can
I think so. I mean, I followed everything, and it everything else looks normal.
You went like this, and you tried to just hit incremental save, not limit incremental save, but incremental save.
Yes, and then a warning.
And then you close, and then if you save and close it, where's the warning come up?
At the bottom right.
Yes, because you hadn't changed anything.
Oh.
It's basically saying that you didn't change anything, so there's nothing to save. So that's why I'm saying change something. Use the tool, use the scale tool or the move tool or something to change it, and then hit Command S, and now it'll save. And now if you go into your projects folder, in your documents folder, in your projects folder, and you put that in your favorites section, and you go into your, here, let me just stop the share, and let me just share. You guys are, share the screen and share my whole screen. You guys will disappear. Oh, actually that worked that time. So now you can see this, yeah? So I have my projects window here, and I have a lot of projects. So I go into this project, I go into scenes, and here is lauriebootcamp.mb, the file that I just saved. But I also have this folder called incremental save, and I can click on that, and I can find, here is lauriebootcamp.mb, and here is the first version that I created. And so instead of it overwriting, it is overwriting every single time you save, it's overwriting this particular file, lauriebootcamp.mb, but it's saving backup copies of your earlier saves into this incremental save folder. So if ever Maya crashes or you get something really weird happening, you can always go back. It's like version history. So incremental save will literally save you at some point. You will be so glad. And if you don't have your project set up correctly, incremental save doesn't work. So you'll be saving away and you will have no incremental save. And the number of tiers I have seen over that, it's a lot. It's a lot. So when do you save? So you want to save as often as you can. You want to save as soon as it seems like if you lost it, if Maya crashed in the next minute, you would cry, you should save. You want to save if you're about to show something to me, because I could easily break your whole file. So you want to save, or I'll start playing around with it because I can't help it. So you want to save before you talk to me, save before you talk to a TA, just save regularly. And you can turn on autosave, and that is if you go to Windows, Settings and Preferences. So it's Windows, Settings and Preferences. And you come to Files and Projects. On the left-hand side, there's a little autosave, and you can enable it. And you can set it to autosave as whatever interval you want it to autosave. And you probably want it to prompt before it saves. But I find autosave to be a pain in the neck because it interrupts you. You're in the middle of something and all of a sudden it's saying, autosave is happening. So maybe without the prompt before save, it'll be a little bit better. It's a good way not to lose your stuff as long as you are in your project folder. It may not be a bad way to work. You could set it for a slightly higher time, for 20 minutes or something, and then go ahead and hit save. And then if you don't like autosave, you can turn it off. Another way to change values, that is one of my favorite ways to change values, it's less so on here, is that you can use a virtual slider. So if you choose one of the attributes, the name of the attribute, like Translate C, and you click it so that it turns blue, you can then middle mouse button, click and drag in the viewport window, and it will change the value like a slider, like it just moves it up and down. It's really nice for something where there's a value that there isn't a manipulator handle for. It's just changing a value, and it allows you to change it sort of slowly and see what happens when you change that value. So that's another way to change a value of an object for an attribute. These are the attributes, the things that describe, in this case, its translation, its transform. This is the transform node. It describes its translation in space, its rotation in world space, and its scale in world space, and whether it's visible or not. We'll talk about that a lot. We get into that in this class. What else do you need to know? What did I forget from the morning, Macy? Do you think we're ready to have them go ahead and, oh, yes, let me just show you this. So if you select your object and you right mouse button click on it, you have an option you'll see a little drop-down menu that comes. There's all kinds of different options. And this is where you could go in and out of object and component mode. So remember, an object is like, I always like to say this, an object is like a chocolate chip cookie. It's the cookie. The components are the things that go into making the cookie, the chocolate chips, the flour, the butter, the salt, the sugar. So in this case, in a polygon, the components are let's start with the vertex, are the vertices. So here, you know that you're in component mode because the lines are now blue instead of white or green. And you can marquee select a bunch of vertices, and you can get the move tool with the W, and you can move them or scale them. You can undo, Command Z if you want. You can right mouse button click and go to edge mode. And now you can select an edge. If you click on it, you select one edge. I'm going to go to the Q key so you can see it. If I double click on it, I select the entire edge ring, and then I could scale it, right? And I can right mouse button click and I can go into face. There's some other things here, but we'll leave those alone for now. And here I can select a face and I can move it in and out. And if I click on one face and then I double click on the face, I shift double click on the face right next to it, it selects that whole ring. So again, I select a face and I shift double click on the face next to it, it selects that whole ring, and then you can scale that. Oops, I did that in a really funky way, like that. And that's how you get objects that look. And then you can go back to object mode by right mouse button click and go to object mode. Now it's looking green or white, and you've just changed the shape. It looks more like an acorn. So that's what modeling basically is taking a shape and moving the vertices, the edges, and the faces around.